All right, we are live. I don't know if you caught that last talk I just had, but at the end of it, I was saying I was about to go to another conversation, and he asked with who, and I said, "Oh, well, it's somebody from the from online that doesn't go by their name." And I said, "They used to go by Contrarian something, but now it's the Honest Doubter." And it was interesting that I caught myself doing a thing that humans do. For some reason, like, I don't know if part of your name change is because of disliking the 420 part. I don't think there's anything wrong with marijuana, but something about the 420 part made me, even though I knew it was contrarian 420, I said contrarian something.
Right.
Um, Anyways, so I just like what I guess what are your thoughts on why was it contrarian 420?
Well, it was meant to be ironic, right? Which was part of the problem, right? So, being the automatic contrarian like is a bad look generally. So,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of implies that you're not really thinking about things. You're just kind of automatically taking the opposite side. And then you
Mm.
add on top of that, 420, which is like the most, memed out, ridiculous thing to put on any moniker. Um,
Mm.
yeah, so it was meant to be ironic, but oftentimes because people took it at face value, I would often be the contrarian. Like, and it just happened.
Mm.
And I am a bit of a contrarian. So, there's all sides of it, but I think I wanted to just kind of start fresh, and on top of all that, I've provided so many spicy takes to so many videos with that moniker. I thought, probably best to reset, and just start
Mm-hmm.
fresh. Because I got to tell you, Carson, this is the first time I've done like because I've always been very kind of selfish with privacy and like, sharing face and sharing all that stuff. And so this is kind of the first time I've actually done, kind of put the face out there and put that all out there. So, but
Gotcha.
yeah, so I don't know. I think I told you too. It's just, one more level of, I don't know, uh, one layer of privacy from the internet to personal life. And we can get into it too. I know we have a bunch of stuff we could talk about, but I do think one of my little philosophies is that I think there's a lot of value in just kind of growing where you're planted and just being like an unknown positive effect to the area that you're in, versus
Mm-hmm.
being like a known, kind of a larger known character. Like I think
Mm.
there's a lot of value to that, and I'd be happy to. I think it's an important point too, so I'd be happy to go into that if we want to. But
Yeah,
for
yeah.
for the sake of things, I'm a friend of you. I'm a friend of your channel. I've loved what you've done with like being a reasonable vegan, and we can get
Mm-hmm.
into some of why I'm technically not a vegan and why I think it's important to be reasonable about veganism if you want to,
Mm-hmm.
help the cause.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go with that. What's your vegan or technically not vegan story?
Yeah. So I grew up kind of a rural Northern California, just standard American diet, hot dogs, hamburgers, that sort of thing. And I remember a formative point for me was when I think I was in fourth grade. And after many a baseball game with many a hot dog eaten, I found a book that was like how things are made. And in like in
Mm.
my classroom, it wasn't in my house. It was just like in on the rack in my classroom. And I read about hot dogs and how they're made. And it was a horror story. Like it was like lips, gums, like separated meat from bone. Like it was the worst horror story of meat production I'd ever read. And I think at like 10 or 11 I had this horrible shock of like these things you've been feeding me all these baseball games have been this amalgamation of like the worst parts of animals. And
Mm.
so that might have started my contrarian streak at age 10 or 11 right there. But going down the line, I actually still continued, standard meat eating diet through college. But and this was like 2008 or so, that I was just having recurring, like anytime I ate, anytime I drank anything, I would have these horrible sinus issues where I just like it completely clogged up sinuses. So I tried everything. I went to the doctor. They gave me like, inhaled what, they give you some wacky pharmaceutical to try and clear it up. But then I read just randomly about the what was it? It's the Master Cleanse. I don't know if you've heard of this.
Mm-mm.
So the Master Cleanse was big, back in the 2000s, and it was maple syrup, cayenne pepper, and lemon juice, and that was all you would
Mm.
have for 10 days, plus water. So it's kind of like a water fast, kind of a juice fast, and I wouldn't recommend it today. I think there's better ways to do a fast than maple syrup, which is the processed sugar. But
Yeah.
yeah, so it's a bit weird. But in any event, I did 10 days of that, and I felt like angelic at the end of 10 days. Like I
Mm.
cleared so much just horrible stuff out of my system that I can't even tell you, and you probably don't want to hear. But it was just like it was this cleansing, this like true cleansing, and I felt so great after 10 days, and so light and so connected to life and living and just vibrant that I just didn't want to go back to my standard diet. And so I just started eating berries. I read into like raw veganism at that point.
Mm.
I had this book called the Raw Vegan Bible. And so I basically just went completely into, pretty hardcore raw veganism after that 10-day cleanse.
Mm.
And I've since leveled out a little bit. I'm probably like 75% raw now, and I'm not technically vegan, which we can get into.
Mm.
But so since about 2008, I've had zero meat, zero dairy, and zero fish or anything. So I've been
Mm.
like completely plant based since 2008. But I still do hold out some space on my shelf for raw honey, which we can get into, which
Mm.
keeps me out of the club, out of the vegan club. So
Yeah. You mentioned dairy and meat, but eggs as well. No eggs.
no eggs. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So raw honey is so, and how much of that do you consume?
Very little. I mean,
Okay.
it's actually it's more for like burns and cuts, right? I think
Oh,
it's
exterior.
yeah. So I
Oh,
think
okay.
it has like a magical property. And actually, if you dare to turn in your vegan card sometime when you have a burn like from a pan or something, you will be shocked how well raw. It has to be raw. It has to be like solid at room temperature.
Mm.
But raw honey is magical for burns. It stops the
Mm.
pain immediately and it heals the burn like overnight. So
Gotcha.
mostly for that, but I will use it for I make like a raw fudge, where it's basically like cashew butter, and then anything you want to put in there, like mint, cacao, whatever,
Hmm.
and then some honey to sweeten it. So yeah,
Gotcha.
but
Gotcha.
I'd say I use like a tablespoon every 2 months, maybe.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I actually I don't know as far as turning in vegan cards or not, but I I haven't for the most part I haven't really had a strong stance on honey. I just like I didn't do much research, but with what little bit I had heard about how taking the honey that the bees need to eat and then feeding them, the bee farmers will feed them various forms of processed sugar, which will cut their lifespan in half. I just kind
Mhm.
of stayed away from it. But
Mhm.
somewhat recently, maybe 6, 7 months ago, I don't know. I was thinking about it and I wasn't too worried about it. And I had a cold of some kind or a flu or something. And I decided I wanted to try some raw honey. So I would put like a tablespoon of raw honey in like some tea I had. I heard that hot tea would kill off the beneficial properties that could help with colds and whatnot. So I'd mix it into cold tea. And so I think I had like a tablespoon of raw honey a day for like 7 days or something like that, with adding some lemon or something in there.
So
Um,
you and I are both 99.99% vegan then.
right? Yeah. And I haven't had it since. I kind of stay away from it because of its. I stay away from processed sugar, and it's. I believe honey acts in the body the same way that most processed sugars do, or even like maple does. Um, but yeah, I'm not. Like for me, it all comes down to needlessly harming animals and that basically. And so the idea of like how long somebody's been doing something or like dabbling in something here or there like doesn't really affect me. Like I would much rather somebody eat like a piece of meat every single month, but drastically cut down, and they're cutting down because they want less animals harmed, and whatever the thing is. And so like the idea, I don't know if I care less about the opinion of various vegans, because being on the internet, I'm so used to half the vegans out there calling me not vegan because of picking up a feather, or
Right.
whatever the thing is, or if it's just that I just don't care in general. Um, but yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I would say we're both in that 99% club. But
Yeah, it's tricky.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know because and this is something we could get into because I've actually interfaced. You had shared the Adelaide Vegan Support Group or whatever. You remember
Hmm.
those guys? So
Yeah.
I do interact with their channel and their lives quite a bit, and I think they're a little bit more extreme on kind of a. It's almost like a purity test, right? Like you can't join our club unless you're a pure vegan. And
Hmm.
have you read Lord of the Rings, Carson?
I have not.
Okay. Well, in
I've
any
read The
way,
Hobbit, but not Lord of the Rings. But yeah, go on.
fair enough. But in any event, there's basically like a scene where there's a huge siege, right? And I remember reading the books, and there was this scene where all this castle is going to be completely overwhelmed by the immensity of the enemy army, right? And so all the people in the castle before the battle starts are cheering on and welcoming any group that enters the castle to like defend it because they're going to be hopelessly outnumbered. It's probably a suicide mission, and anyone that comes to their support before that siege starts is a huge, it's like this great moment of fellowship, right?
Hmm.
And I feel the same way with veganism and plant-based eating. Like the world is arrayed against such people, right? The world eats meat. Like it's a vast majority of people that are meat eaters, and
Hmm.
so if your purity test if that filter is too strong, and you don't let people into the castle to defend it because you're basically ID checking them before they enter the gates, and you're saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, your ID is past. You can't come in. You can't defend this castle." Like you're
Hmm.
you're you're going to get destroyed because you have no support, right? You're turning away support instead of welcoming it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I feel with some of these folks that are a little bit too extreme about this purity test with veganism. I think they need to understand they're horribly outnumbered by the world, and they're in a light. And if they believe what they say about the extremity of the situation for animals, they're in a life or death battle, right? They're in a serious battle for the lives and the wellness of animals, for the wellness of people. And so if you turn away someone because they have a tablespoon of raw honey from a local apiary that is like treating the bees well, and you say no, like screw off, we don't need you, you're not pure.
Hmm.
You're really hurting you're going to be destroyed, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I was actually talking with my buddy Phil right before this about that exact topic, because he said that he's been considering going vegan. He definitely feels moral consideration for animals, but health wise, he's convinced that he needs animal products to be healthy. But he's at the point where he's pretty much only eating what he feels that is healthy for him. And I think it's so important that we get even people to that level involved in conversations. And I don't know what the word should be. I don't. I don't know. I'm not necessarily saying that somebody that eats animal products should be called a vegan, but there should be a word, and then that word should be what matters. I would totally stop caring about the word vegan at that point. There should be something that is a word or a collection of words that's used to further progress help harming less animals. And having the vegan club isn't doing that. I mean, that's helping. Don't get me wrong. It's awesome the amount of vegans there are. It's awesome how that can grow. But if there are more non-vegan humans that want to that care about animals than there are vegans. But those people never get brought to the table. I have many friends that don't think they need animal products to be healthy, but they do it because they were raised that way and they're addicted to it and they wish it was illegal to eat animals so they could just stop. But they eat it. So
Better, Billy.
there's those type of people. But
Have
then
some,
there's
have some self-control. Like, have some willpower,
yeah.
dear Lord.
Well, I don't know. I don't know. It's complicated because of how addictions work for different people. Now, I myself have had issues with being overweight and being addicted to food for the majority of my adult life, and part of that's because of how I was raised, probably as well.
But Carson, but
Um,
you know,
mhm.
I think in your heart of hearts, you know that those addictions are a 2-day habit, right? You could break that addiction if you stop for a day or two, you'd break the pattern of that addiction and you would stop. You could.
You, I think you probably could. I think usually it's thought of as addictions are more like maybe a 21 day. I don't know where that number comes from, but I've heard that before.
Yeah, but then
But
you're already self-defeating yourself if you can do it before that, right?
maybe, but I've gone back and forth so many times where I'll eat all the vegan junk food, the Impossible Burgers, all the things, and I'm like so addicted to it. I love it. It makes me so happy. And then
It is
I'll go
good.
like
Possible
months
burgers
eat.
are tasty.
Yeah, but I'll go like months eating really well, eating clean, feeling better, dropping the weight, but then the wrong emotion or something will just make me go, I need this really bad right now, and then I'll do it. And so I think it's hard to understand the mindset of others, and it's hard to figure out exactly how human minds work because everybody's just so different in so many different things. And I
See,
and
I don't,
I
I don't
don't.
know. I don't agree with this. Like, I think
Okay.
this is the primrose path to lack of like asserting willpower, right? This is you saying everyone's unique, everyone's subjective. My subjective path means that I am more susceptible to taking this path, and therefore I can and should, and it's okay if I do, right? Like, I would say people are don't you think people are mostly the same? Like, do you think there's an Iranian sorrow and an American sorrow?
I do think most people are the same. So when people talk about like, oh, well, this person's best diet for them is probably carnivore, and this person's probably whole food, I think that's nonsense. I think in the
Yeah.
same way that elephants have a elephant typical diet, humans are the same way. And I think some people vary as far as people can have allergies or whatever. But yeah, I think we're mostly the same in a lot of aspects. But I would say when it comes to something like addiction, maybe not so much. I'm sure if we did some kind of an experiment that would be unethical, where we just take 10,000 people and we shoot them all up with heroin, you will probably find that there will be a wide spectrum of which ones of those people will become addicted. Like, let's say that they were all told, okay, we gave you this one shot of heroin, and for the rest of the study, nobody has to ever do heroin again. But if you want it, it's free. The people that loved that first shot of heroin that just go, okay, one more, I'll do one more and then I'll be done. There will
Right.
be a large number of people that do that.
I
And there will be other people that, due to however they were born, how their brain works, it's not a non-human brain, but their brain will go like, oh
You
no,
see, that's where I disagree.
okay.
That's where I disagree with you. I don't. I put much less emphasis on the genetic, inborn emphasis. Like, I think someone is more likely to like in your experiment, right? Everyone gets the shot of heroin. Um, how they physiologically react to the heroin is probably very similar, right? The opioids hit the opioid receptors. Everyone has the same receptors, et cetera, et cetera.
Hmm.
What differs is their psychological makeup, right? There,
Yeah.
it's not. It's I don't think it's a genetic makeup so much as it's a learned psychological, habitual how they react psychologically to stimuli,
I
which is
agree. I think I worded it poorly because I don't know much about the topic, about like how brains work and the
well, I don't know about
difference.
any topics. So yeah,
Or I just mean the difference between like what your brain is as you're born versus what how your brain develops through being raised or whatever. So when I say born with it, I guess what I mean is like the brain I had when I was born I feel like that brain was a brain that could lead me to the path I'm at right now,
No,
and
but
then
that's
your brain
disempowering.
could lead
That's
you.
totally disempowering, right? It's like it's saying I have no choice and it's out of my control.
Well, yeah, and I think people will use it as an excuse, and I don't think that's good. We'll try to justify different things. We'll say like, I know this is bad, but like in the morning time when you just wake up and you're like, oh yeah, I don't need to eat this unhealthy thing. But at nighttime when you get sleepy, you'll go like, you'll come up with excuses for it. And I think there's different people that would be better or worse at coming up with excuses. And I think that all comes down to psychology, how you were
Yep.
raised, all kinds of different things. I'm not trying to use it as an excuse. I just think that there clearly is a human that can say, I'm not going to use that heroin again. And then there's a human that will say, I'm going to use that heroin again. And I don't know if it's fair to say this human is better because they can more easily make that choice. Um, but there's some people that will have a harder time making the choice and they push through and make the choice. And then there's some people that have an easy time making the choice. And I don't think they're the same either. Um,
But
so,
I
yeah.
think a person that wouldn't take another shot of the heroin, telling a person that is going to, hey, you don't need to do that, or hey, it's not, you're not obligated to do this, uh, and 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 if that person who's already planning and already telling themselves, I love that feeling so much, I'm gonna take it again. If they
Mhm.
hear from another person saying, hey, you're not obligated to do that, and like it's in your control to choose whether you
Mhm.
shall or shall not, like I think that has an effect, and that could have an effect on someone.
It
So
could.
it's
But
so much about
what do
the
you
language,
think?
right?
What do you think? Okay, so I'll just use myself as an example. Like,
Yeah.
I want nothing more than to be healthy. If I could
Mhm.
press a button right now, I would pay every dime I have to press a button that would make me not be able to choose the bad choices again of health food. I would just say like never touch another processed food item, something vague like that. Um, but if I'm anything like I have been my whole life, there will be a point where I will see a certain food item, and I will tell myself I know that's unhealthy for me. I know if I have that, I'm going to have a downward spiral for a week or so, and I don't want it. But something in me is telling me to take it, and then I'll eventually take it and eat it, even though a big part of me is telling me not to. What exactly are we calling that? Because I know that exists because I go through it all the time.
Well, I think it's a insecurity in the moment, right? You feel a lack, um, you feel like you need some stimuli to cover up a feeling of insecurity or a feeling of
Mm-hmm.
dis-ease, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so in that, and you know that you have a short-term correction for that feeling of dis-ease, which is to devour an Impossible Burger or like whatever vegan donuts or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so that does solve your dis-ease in the moment. So, but so the I think the issue is you're wanting something that will solve a feeling of dis-ease in the present overwhelms your rational mind thinking like, okay, but the next week or the next day I'm going to feel terrible, right? So you're willing
Mm-hmm.
to trade the panacea that will help you feel better that moment for the less real and conjectural future feeling of not feeling good again, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is just, I mean, you could say I'm right or I'm wrong, but I do think that that's a part of it. Like we want
Mm-hmm.
to solve a feeling of dis-ease in the present. And if
Mm-hmm.
that dis-ease is solved by devouring something bad or taking heroin or whatever, we'll do it. And we say to hell, and we'll say to hell with the future. It doesn't matter. I feel bad right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's a similar thing with a lot of people and meat. So the right conversations for a lot of meat eaters to even think about the morals of eating animals doesn't really happen for most people. But if it were to happen, I think what we would find is the same way that most people, vegan or not vegan, wouldn't want to give up all cakes, donuts, ice cream, sugary processed food. The same thing would go for meat eaters that, as they ponder it and talk about it, they recognize that they are just as philosophically vegan as me or you or any other vegans. I think when they ponder this idea of, okay, here's my options, I realize that I don't want animals to be hurt. I can cut out meat products or not. I think the morals in their mind aren't going to change. They're just going to justify it or not justify it the same way I might justify in that moment eating a donut. And I think I don't know what the way to do it is, but I think we need to bring those people to the conversation, the ones that are eating the animals only because they're addicted to it, but then also the people that are eating only the animals because they view it as a need for health. Because I think both of those, it's easy to help one of those. The ones that they're addicted to it, I mean, it's not easy to help, but the more people that get on each other's side and say, "Hey, I'm, let's be give each other friendly reminders to eat healthy," and the more people around you or people you live with are on board for helping you get healthy and kick certain habits, will make that a lot easier. I'm sure a meat eater that morally wants to be vegan and lives with 4 roommates that are all vegan, it's going to be a lot easier for that person than if their roommates were all not vegan.
Yeah, but you can't depend on externals. Like it has to be, you have to be solid within yourself, or you're going to fail, right? If you
Mm-hmm.
depend on, if an addict depends on the group home and he's out of the group home, he's screwed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to, and this is why I think it's really philosophical, and like why I think it depends on how, like I said, that dis-ease in the moment. I think that's the difference between, again, your heroin example, right? Going
Mm-hmm.
into that group, everyone gets the same shot. The person who's content and solid in themselves in each moment won't be as inclined to need that second shot, right? They're going to
Yeah.
say, "Well, that was a great experience, and I learned something about myself." But if they're solid in the next moment, outside of being high on the heroin, they're going to be much less likely to take that additional shot. But the person who's dependent, who their contentment depends on externalities, on people, on relationships, on environment, on all these things, I think they're going to be more apt to take that second shot because their contentment depends on externalities versus being self-contented.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I agree, and it's definitely a good thing to be a person that can make that choice in a better way. I yeah, and I don't know what the right answer is, but
The right answer is be self-contented. Like be
yeah.
contained. Like learn that you have everything within yourself. Like
Oh yeah,
read Self-Reliance by Emerson twice.
I'm gonna
Right?
write that down.
I'm telling you, everyone needs to read that book. It's like 90 pages, and it's like the best thing American authors have produced outside of Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy.
All right, I will check that out. But yeah, yeah, it's just it's interesting. I think you're right, and I don't know what the right answer is for helping the people that need the help. I mean, me being one of them. Luckily, I don't need help with a lot of different things. Like because of different things in my upbringing, I never touched cigarettes or alcohol, so I never became addicted to either of those things to have to need help off either of those. It's not quite the case with food. And then I also happen to be a person that has a harder time, at least with food, kicking the things that I'm addicted to. But I think you're right. I think a lot of it has to do with learning and understanding, self growth. A lot of it has to do with others around you. And I think you're right that you can't rely just on others around you. You have to be strong willed as well. But that also can only go so far if you are let's say you see approximately 200 people a day, around the same 200 people from your town. If every single person does a thing different than you, it's really hard. We're social creatures. We try to fit in. I don't know what exactly any of this means on the topic of veganism necessarily, but
No, it means everything. Like
yeah.
again, we're talking about you tied it together with the meat eater who feels like yes, they're ethically vegan, like philosophically, or like conceptually. Like they wouldn't want a dog hurt, they wouldn't want a baby lamb hurt, but they'll still take a bite off a lamb chop at Easter, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's like, so it come, and you in the same way, and people, that struggle with addiction in the same way. It's like they know intellectually, conceptually, that I don't want to devour this. I just bought this like slab of Impossible Burger meat, and I know I'm going to feel terrible if I grill up half of it and eat it right now, but
Mm-hmm.
I really know it's going to be great right now, so I'm going to do it anyway, right? So in the same way, like eating meat, like I know intellectually, I know conceptually that this is perhaps not the best thing, but here I am in the moment, and it looks really good, and I know I'm going to feel good right now, and so that I'm going to do it, and to hell with the future, and to hell with what's going to happen next.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think that does tie in. So if you can, again, if you can make someone not depend on some very specific stimulation, like an Impossible Burger, like heroin, like beef, like steak or whatever, then they're less likely to need it. Like they're less likely to depend on it. And so I really do think that veganism and philosophy have to be like hand in hand, because I think you can, and again, I say this as a non-vegan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Technically, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, you have to be solid in yourself, and so with so many things, right? And then if you're solid in yourself, then come 199 people in my town that I see, I don't care what they're doing. Like I know in myself what is best for me and for, I mean, the world is crazy, Carson, right? The world is
Mm-hmm.
absolutely insane. So you have to, if you followed the general path of the mass in this world, it's a disaster. So
Mm-hmm.
in this, like in the same way with your small town example, you can't be affected by the 200 people. Like you have to know what's right and assert it and follow it, and regardless of what everyone's doing, like you can't be affected by externalities, I don't think. Like, and I think more solid you are in yourself, the less externalities.
Gotcha. Yeah. 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 And it's definitely tricky. Yeah, I'm trying to branch my thoughts onto various different possibilities. Like there's a well-known psychologist that we probably both know of who, because of the wrong prescriptions being prescribed, got addicted to benzos.
Oh,
Um,
JP. Oh, JP.
and and so like I try to imagine that kind of thing where if somebody's addicted to something like that, and even if they might have the best of the best minds to not let themselves be addicted to it, but then they know they need to get off it. But then if all the people they're around are trying to get them to stick to it, like I don't think it's as simple as being just capable of saying no to everything and being so strong-willed, but I think that's obviously the biggest part of it, trying to be a person that can stand strong and make that should always be the strongest goal. There will be cases where the only approach is going to be that doctors have you locked up in a room and you go through withdrawals while you're getting over an addiction. I don't know if food's quite like that. I think for some people maybe it is like that. I think if you took certain people that are strongly addicted to foods and you just had them in a place where they were locked in, they were fed all healthy meals for 3 months, and they never got to touch unhealthy food, and then you set them off into the wild, not
Well,
wild, but
fasting is that, right? I mean,
yeah,
fasting is that process where, and that's where I got
yeah,
into veganism, right? It's like a shock therapy, padded cell for the digestive system, right?
yeah, yeah. Well, and for some people, it wouldn't be as simple as just deciding to fast. They might need that bigger push to get over the addiction, and then they'll be strong enough themselves to make the right choices after that. But to get it initially, they might have to voluntarily put themselves in a building that would shut them in and not let them out. I don't
Well,
know if that even exists, but could be
here's
helpful.
another thing. Here's another thing. I think people have a general. I don't think people that whatever pleasure they feel from a certain stimulation, like Impossible Burger, you can
Hmm.
get that. You can replace that, the same exact pleasure receptors, the same exact feeling, can be replicated if you get into the habit of just eating a salad every day, right?
Mm.
You'll feel the same pleasure that you with the salad if you just break the habit of the burger. So it like the
Gotcha.
same feeling of contentment, the same feeling of pleasure is attainable. The feeling of pleasure isn't tied to that specific stimuli. It's general. Like it's in your physiology, right? So
Hmm.
same with heroin, same with any addiction, right? You can feel this pleasure you feel in a forest walk or like a hike, like or like eating like a really tasty, delicious
Oh, you cut
salad
out.
with microgreens.
Okay.
Back?
Yeah, you're back. It just cut out for a sec.
Yeah, yeah. The point is like you're still getting the same pleasure, but it's just through different stimuli. The pleasure isn't tied to the stimuli.
Gotcha. Um, uh, okay, so I'm curious. I got about 10 or so more minutes. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the health aspect of it, a mixture of what you think of that science has shown us as far as health goes, but then also what your thoughts would be if we discovered something else. So, just full disclosure, because we were talking about the honey thing earlier and being like 99% vegan or whatever. When I found out about my health issues with like fatty liver and some other things about 4 months ago, I dabbled in a little bit of fish eating. So I've had a little bit of sardines, a little bit of salmon. I basically just try to do as much research as possible, find out the healthiest things. I cut out all processed foods, just, eating as much whole fruits, veggies, nuts and seeds, making my own soups. Everything as healthy as possible, and everything involving high LDL and fatty liver pointed me in the direction of eating some seafood. So I kind of dabbled in some things as I was learning. I don't know if I will continue. I definitely don't feel good about it. I haven't looked into the research myself to know how strong the evidence is on pain of fish. I don't know the difference between the pain of fish versus other animals. Um, but as far as our vegan cards go, if for your honey you're at 99.99, then maybe I'm at 98.0. But anyways, it's complicated. I don't know exactly how to view it. I know who I am and what I feel and what I stand for, and but I do care strongly about health, and I think it make in the same sense that somebody that is vegan would say if they were on an island and they had to kill something to survive. I view improved health similarly. Um, so, anyways, it's complicated, but what have you what do you feel convinced of when it comes to health? Like, how much do you feel like we as humans doing studies on humans that we know for sure that the healthiest way is to cut out all animal products, or if you think some might be healthy but not healthy enough that are worth having? And then I have a follow up question after that. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I think I think objectively, like the healthiest diet for man is the healthiest diet for simians because we are if you to a human digestive system on that same operating table, they're going to be identical. Like they're virtually identical.
Hmm.
So and if you look at a carnivore's digestive system, like mouth to rear, it's a straight shot basically. And so I think we're much, I mean, just from an evolutionary timeline, like if you buy into the evolutionary connection between simians and man, which, I think there's enough connection between the two just objectively. Like if you just look at them on a chart, they're so similar that I think the ideal diet for man is the ideal diet for simians, which is raw plants, nuts, seeds, or
Can you spell
plants, nuts,
simian
fruit.
for me?
Simian.
Okay.
So I think raw plants, nuts, fruits is the ideal diet for man. And
Hmm.
I think that, yes, simians, and people in comments and carnivore people and all these people love to bring up like, oh my God, but simians eat meat and they'll eat each other every once in a while. I'm talking about daily diet. Yeah, a simian, I'm sure, would eat an egg. I'm sure a simian would eat, would take, maybe it would eat some meat here and there. I'm sure in territorial conflict, it would devour, the face of another simian, whatever. That's fine. But the point is daily diet. Like the daily diet of a simian is raw plants, nuts, fruit. So, and again, just how similar we are to them, I think that's the ideal diet for man. So as close as you can get your diet to that, I think you're going to be healthiest. And
Hmm.
that's just, have you heard of the phrase Lindy?
No.
Lindy?
Mm-mm.
So it's what's that guy's name? That Taleb, I forget his last name. But anyway, it's like this famous kind of mathematician fellow who came up with this concept. Maybe he didn't come up with it, but anyway, he popularized the concept of Lindy. And Lindy just means as long as something has been done, it's better in as much as it's been done that long, right?
Mm.
So the idea being like raw foods, like raw, like not cooking your food has been around for a billion more years than cooking your food, which has been around only since man tamed fire, right?
Hmm.
So probably for the evolutionary time period that our liver developed and our small intestine developed and like our entire system developed, that time period it was unfired foods, right? It was raw foods. It was
Hmm.
probably simian diet. It was raw plants, nuts, fruit. So that I think, in as much as that was the formative diet throughout all that time, that's probably the most ideal. It's like the engine evolved to expect that fuel,
Hmm.
right? So I don't know if this is answering your point, but yeah, that's my general view of diet is that as close as you can get to a simian's diet is probably the ideal diet for man. And as much as you can get to raw, unprocessed foods, that's also the ideal.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then there's this complicated thing where we may have evolved for something to be an ideal diet, and it's probably closest to the best diet. But there could be situations where something that we're not evolved to consume, but if we were to consume it and then see how it affects us, it might even be better for us. So, for example, like I don't know if before we figured out before Homo sapiens figured out how to cook things, if legumes were ever consumed. At least for the most part. Like I don't know if you can like get a pod of black beans or kidney beans while they're growing and eat them fresh, but imagining you can't. Um, when humans weren't able to cook dried ones, we can later, when we learn how to, and then when we learn how to have scientific method and study things, we can go like, oh, even though we didn't evolve to eat these, and usually what animals evolve to eat is what's best for that animal, we can detect, okay, this is making us live longer than if we didn't have it. I think that is something we should recognize as a possibility, but in my intuition tells me it's unlikely to happen often.
I agree with you. I mean, there's exceptions, right? I think like some herbs like turmeric, right, probably weren't in the average diet for the average simian, but we have discovered through 1,000 years of folk medicine that this stuff is great for inflammation and great for XYZ, right? So even
Hmm.
though it doesn't tie into my general theory of like Lindy, the diet, the longer a diet's been in a similar species, the probably the better it is for us. Of course, there's
Hmm.
exceptions, right? Like turmeric, I think is a good exception. So I would say that yeah, I'm open to non-Lindy parts of the diet, but I do think that kind of the basis of my diet is in that concept that the longer a simian, the longer systems that are similar to ours have been doing something, that probably the better it is generally for us.
Gotcha. Now, if you were to, if enough scientific studies were done that discovered something similar to the turmeric thing, but involving meat, um, being healthy for humans, what would the health level have to be to make you feel that it outweighs the moral side of it?
Well, I mean, the problem with, I mean, it's kind of a, I understand the question and your phrasing, and the question doesn't have to be based in reality, but almost everything we see from studies shows the opposite of that, right? That
Mhm.
red meat is carcinogenic, red meat is, unhealthy, et cetera, right? So, I mean, I think that, and that all follows in line with, I think, the theory that, it's not what we're meant to do. It's not, the Lindy diet for man is not meat.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't know. I could go into a whole thing about that too. It's like, if we were carnivores, taking like, imagine like, those like yellow chickens, like the chicks, like the little chicks,
Mhm.
right? They're yellow, they're small, they're adorable. If and imagine just the head of the chick, right? So, the black eyes, the beak, cute little face, little ears. If
Mhm.
we were a carnivore, we would have no problem just taking a chomp off that head and just
Yeah.
eating the whole thing, and crunching up the beak and the head and the everything and loving it,
Yeah.
right?
Well, yeah, not just that, we would salivate when we see it.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, and we
Instead,
don't.
instead we were horrified by that prospect,
Yeah.
and every meat eater, tends to cook, season, et cetera, with oils and salt and pepper and all these, accoutrements. They mostly just eat and the muscle and the fat of the creature, and they avoid the organs. Generally, they avoid the brain, the eyes, the skin, the fur, right, the
Mhm.
intestines, like all these things that would be like, golden corral for a carnivore, are completely just abhorrent to most people. And of
Mhm.
course, there's exceptions. Like some hardcore carnivores, like, probably do get certain vitamins by eating organs, but it's so rare. Like, it's so
Mhm.
rare for actual carnivore folks to actually eat organs. I think they're mostly just, putting Instagram photos of the sirloin steak and saying, "Oh, I'm a carnivore," right? Which has been
Mhm.
cooked in oils, cooked in salt, all these things. So yeah, I think I got off track of your question though. What was the
No,
initial?
it's fine. I was just curious if there was a certain level of health change
Oh,
that
right. Hmm.
that would affect you if it was a scientific finding, like the turmeric thing.
Yeah.
I agree with everything you're saying. It seems like we're closest to apes. It seems like there are certain apes that we are closer to than others. 75% of a chimpanzee's diet is figs, actually, which I love figs. I wish I can get them fresh more often. But yeah, no, I agree with, and the same thing where when we look at an animal like a gazelle or a zebra, we're not like looking at it going, "Oh man, I'm so hungry." And so I'm with you on a lot of these things. I was just curious that, similar to the turmeric, if you were to be told like this steak, I'm wanting to not use fish as an example because I don't want it to seem like I'm trying to figure out a way to consume fish. From anything I've looked into, the only animal flesh itself that gets any positive mention, that from what I can find in health studies, is fish. So that's why I'm trying to make this hypothetical not be connected to the fact that I've had a little bit of fish in the past couple months, which I don't like the taste, by the way. I did it. I've looked into a couple things that led to the sardine and the salmon. For health reasons, I did not enjoy the taste whatsoever. I don't know if I'm going to ever have it again, or if it'll be a thing where I have like a little piece of something every 6 months just to, as like a backup, what if these people are right type thing. And so I'm not trying to justify that. So I guess we could look at fish. But either way, it really doesn't matter because I'm not trying to like connect myself to it. I'm
No,
just wondering.
I get your question though, right?
Okay, yeah.
You're asking, like, is there a point, like, where, even like, you're questioning whether the ethical and the health, basically you're putting the point of the ethics versus the health, right?
Hmm.
Which is an important point. Like, and I would say I'm more of a health-based, plant-based person than I am an ethical, plant-based person. Like, I do think that it's just the healthiest diet for man, and that's kind of
Hmm.
why I'm interested in it. And I think this kind of does coincide with some of the discussions I've had with vegans about, how to, how to expand the franchise a little bit. And I think approaching health-based people with, hey, by the way, like this diet is super healthy, and if you want to reach maximum potential, if you want to feel great every day, look into this diet. Um, and then we can talk about ethics after that, right? But there's a lot of people that are interested in health, versus ethics.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you approach people with that option, like, hey, this is, by the way, a great health option as well as being ethical, I think that's another approach, versus just front loading. And I've seen in some of the comments here, even like, talking about the animal holocaust and all this, right? Like this is front loading the ethics side just 100%, like putting 100 tons of the ethics in front of a person and saying, look at this 100 tons of ethical considerations you're not considering, right? And if the person isn't inclined to buy into that, or they're not, they haven't considered ethics, or they don't even think about that, they're just going to be turned off by that entire approach. But if you go to that same person and say, hey, by the way, this is one of the healthiest diets for man, it probably reduces cancer rates, it probably makes you feel better every day, all these things, that same person who denied the ethical approach might accept the health approach, right?
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, this is all me not answering your questions.
It's true, but it's okay.
So
I like everything you're saying,
yeah.
but yeah.
So
So like, here's two ways you can look at it, and then I have a question for you from people listening.
yeah, sure.
Um, but you can look at it two different ways. So you have your current health you have now. How long have you been 99.99% vegan?
About 2008.
Okay, that's a long time. So you know how you feel and you feel good. So you got two ways of looking at it. You could either imagine a hypothetical where studies lead to a finding that would convince you to where you are convinced that if you were to consume one fish or one steak or something a month, that you would how you feel now would improve by 10%. Okay, so you can look at it like that, or you can imagine that if your health was declined from what it is now, because this might be your optimal health, what you're at now. So imagine if you were like 10% less than you are now, and you had to consume a fish or a steak a month to get to where you're at now. In either of those cases, would you feel like that amount of health? And I know it's hard to picture what 10% health is from whatever, but which elements of the morals, like which things would you do and not do? You could say like, oh, I would do this once a month, but I would not harm 3 entire separate animals in a month, or something like that. What's the scale looking like for you?
Yeah. I mean, I guess the problem with, why I'm having an issue answering this is because it does, the Lindy kind of backbone of my approach to life and diet, wherein the longer term it's been with the species, the better it probably is for the species,
Mm-hmm.
means that I'm inherently suspect of any processing, right? Because processing is what, maybe 1 million years old at most,
Mm-hmm.
like in the sense of like processing with heating, fire, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So I would be inherently suspect of any health claim that said that a processed piece of meat, cooked muscle, etc., was beneficial. I would just be inherently suspect of that,
Okay,
because
well, let's take something like a chimp. I think let's imagine you weren't like grossed out by the idea of termites, but that we found out termites are sentient, which I believe they probably are. I don't know if you've seen chimps take the stick and they put it in, the termites hold onto
hmm
the stick, and then they
hmm
go.
yep, yep,
Aside from the gross factor of that, like, so I feel like we don't need to eat insects. But if we were to find out that there is a good beneficial element to eating those insects, and that it's similar to lentils, but a tiny bit better for us because we evolved to do it just like chimps have. Um, would the level of sentience that's likely in a termite make you not consume a termite?
yeah, that's a tricky question. I'm still, I think, like you, I'm on the fence about, I do have a similar hierarchy of consciousness, and like, because you have to, right? There's there's a, we have simians and we have us, and we have very s- symbolic language using high apes, which are, I think, are at the highest level of sentience. But then if we have to have some sort of sentience chart, because if we don't, then when you take a shower, you kill a billion microorganisms, right? Which are living, which, et cetera, right? So I've never met a vegan that cares about a microorganism, like,
Mm-hmm.
that, or a parasite, right? Some small creature, very small creature. So,
Mm-hmm.
or just, when you take a step outside, you probably stepped on at least one creature that is arguably wriggling, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's like there has to be some differentiation between a dog versus a amoeba. Um, and if you don't have that differentiation, then you're causing harm by just about anything you do. Taking a shower, rubbing your face probably killed skin cells that had some creature. There's an infinitude of organisms everywhere. So, I think you do have to have some sentience chart of consideration. And I'm not saying you
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't consider the amoeba, but I think if you had to choose between the amoeba and the dog, or the dog and the human, I think you would choose the human over the dog, and the dog over the amoeba. Um,
Gotcha.
so with that said, I don't kill anything, right? Consciously. Like, I don't kill ants, I don't kill insects, I don't hurt any creature that's moving around that I can see and avoid hurting. Um, so I think, in that, to answer your question in a very long-winded way, I wouldn't probably I wouldn't probably eat those termites, right? Even if there was some study that said there was some minute health benefit. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, but
Okay.
again, it's debatable, right? Because I do eat raw honey, which you could argue is used from insects like the bees, which
Mm-hmm.
are, they're, I think it's like an open apiary, but you can still argue they're imprisoned in this box, and they're making for honey for humans, etc. So yeah, I mean, there's nuance in the point, but that's why I did.
Would you not eat honey if the exact honey you eat, if hypothetically we only got that from extracting it from bees that we had to kill? Like, it is part of it the fact that it's something they're making and not part of them?
Yeah, actually, it's a great point, because I used to take, like, years ago, I used to take royal jelly, until I realized that royal jelly they do actually kill, I think, the bees to create it, or
Oh,
I think they even kill the queen, maybe, but there's some
hmm.
harm that's done to the bees to create royal jelly, and so I took that out of my diet, because I just didn't like that. So yeah,
Gotcha.
and there's nuance there, of course, but I think that, again, it's, yeah, I think I wouldn't eat the bugs for the 1 or 2% increase in health.
Gotcha. Okay. Let me ask you one more question, and then I have to hop off here.
Hmm.
It's sort of a question. I'm just going to read this and let you do with it what you will.
Yeah,
So, Philip Boardman here in the comments says, Carson, if you're reading the chat, we would like a clarification of an honest doubter's appeal to nature. I think he's using it as a heuristic for the ideal diet, not as an ethical justification.
I would agree. Was that Lewis? Yeah, Lewis and I have
That
chatted.
was Philip.
Oh, was it Philip? Okay,
Yeah.
I saw Lewis saying it was an appeal to nature too, but yeah, it is. It is. It's not. It's not. It's. I think it is a health physiological based argument, and not an ethical argument.
Gotcha. All right, cool. Well, that was a great talk. I enjoyed it so much that I went past the time I meant to stop, because I'm about to do an AMA, which I'm going to do in about 1 minute.
Yeah,
So,
I'll be in there.
yeah, awesome. So, yeah, that's good talk. I'd like to do it again sometime, and it'd also be good. It seemed like a lot of people here in the chat really enjoyed a lot of your thoughts you had and analogies, and so maybe we can set up
Lewis, are those
talks.
thumbs down for me? I love you, Lewis. Why are those thumbs down for me? Oh, I feel bad. I gotta stop paying attention to the chat. I was doing great until I realized the chat was even there, and then I got derailed.
No, you're fine. And Lewis is great too. We'll set up a talk with the two of you talking as well.
No, I love it. Yeah,
But
because I'd
yeah,
love to get into philosophy more too, like in some Wittgenstein and skepticism. But you have an AMA
yeah.
to do, so kick me
Yep.
out. Let's get rid of
Sounds
me.
good. All right. Take care.
All right, good chatting. Thanks.